Nippert Stadium is college football's Wrigley Field. I'll explain why.
You are Locked On Bearcats, your daily podcast on the Cincinnati Bearcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, here we go. Thank you so much for making Locked On Bearcats your first listen every day. It's free and available wherever you listen to podcasts, including if you watch us on YouTube, it's also there. So subscribe to our Locked On Bearcats YouTube channel. Follow us to get an alert every time that we drop a new episode. Today's episode of Locked On Bearcats is brought to you by, let me pull it up here. It is brought to you by, I had to find the overlay. It is brought to you by Bird Dogs. Bird Dogs clothing, my favorite brand of clothing. Go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege and they'll throw in a free custom Bird Dogs Yeti-style tumbler with every order. My name's Alex Frank, your host each and every day, right here on the Locked On Bearcats podcast. We're, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. 100 days from now, the Cincinnati Bearcats will play the Oklahoma Sooners in their first ever Big 12 conference football game. I pray that is a nip and night game. And I also pray, more so, cannot recommend enough, that you check out a recent column written by Berry Tramel of the Oklahoman, who is going to be Berry Tramel on this show next week. He's going to be on next week, either Wednesday or Thursday of next week. And he's going to talk about a recent column that he wrote on Nippert Stadium. And I can't tell you how fascinating it is. How much Berry does Nippert Stadium justice in this column that he wrote. And the biggest takeaway from that column, one of the biggest things he said, was that Nippert Stadium is college football's Wrigley Field. And think about basically the reason why he said that. That was the crescendo in the column. His take on Nippert Stadium is that it's going to bring an urban feel, an urban atmosphere to the Big 12. And let's face it, Nippert Stadium is not the biggest stadium in the Big 12. In fact, it is, I believe, the second smallest stadium in the Big 12 behind Houston. It's not Texas that holds 100,000 or Oklahoma that holds, I'm not sure how much Oklahoma holds, but it's a big stadium. It's not a stadium that holds 100,000 fans, or 90,000, or 80,000, or even 70,000, or even 50,000. It holds 40,000. But yet, Nippert Stadium has the opportunity to be one of the best, if not the best atmosphere in the Big 12. Berry Tramel even said, "Get ready, Big 12. You're about to welcome a campus and a football experience unlike anything to which you've been accustomed." Now, just think about that for a minute. Oklahoma has a great atmosphere. West Virginia has a great atmosphere when they're good. Country roads take me home. Texas is a great atmosphere when they're good. You saw that atmosphere when they played Alabama last year. But the University of Cincinnati and them bringing Nippert Stadium and that going to the Big 12, it's going to be unique because think of the Big 12 schools right now. They're outside of Texas. I think Texas, outside of them, which is in a very, very large city in Austin, which holds, I believe, around 2.2 million people, I believe, according to Berry Tramel. 2.2 million people. Houston is going to be a big market, fourth largest city in the country, 7.3 million people. But right now, outside of Texas, in the Big 12, what is the next largest city that a college football, that a team, university, school in the Big 12 is in? Manhattan, Kansas, Lawrence, Kansas, Ames, Iowa, Morgantown, West Virginia, Ames, Iowa, I already mentioned them, Waco, Texas, I guess TCU, Fort Worth, near Dallas. I'll give him that. Lubbock, Texas. The point I'm trying to make here is that the Cincinnati Bearcats, and Berry did an excellent job describing Nippert Stadium's location, right in the middle of campus, 3 miles north of downtown, bringing a very urban feel. And what's amazing to me is this, and it really makes me appreciate where I went to school, and if you're a student listening to this, where you currently go to school, if you're a fellow alum like me, where you went to school, whether you are an athletic administrator, a professor, or anybody else associated with the University of Cincinnati, but particularly from the student's perspective, and I live this, you get to walk through the home stadium of your university's football team that is now a Power 5 member, or going to be in 16 days. You get to walk through that stadium. As Berry notes, there are no gates to Nippert Stadium. It is secure around the perimeter on game days, yes. But on a Tuesday morning or a Tuesday afternoon, it is free and open to the public. And next year, after July 1st, you are going to be able to sit outside, eat your lunch. I mean, my favorite thing was eating fish sandwich and fries at lunch from Stadium View Cafe, which just so happens to overlook Nippert Stadium. And you now, on a Tuesday afternoon, can walk through the stadium that is home to a Big 12 school, Big 12 football team. And you see that Big 12 logo on the field, and you can sit outside, you can go down on the field, play some kickball, football, soccer, you can play, throw the football around, you can do all those things. That is the uniqueness that Nippert Stadium brings. But don't be fooled, because on game days, and I have lived this, I lived the conference championship game in 2021 on the field. I lived the 2019 season. That stadium is rocking on game days. The Big 12 has no idea. Yeah, again, it's a small stadium in terms of its capacity. But the way it's designed and the way Berry Tramel compares it to Wrigley Field, you think about the architecture of Nippert Stadium, how it's smack dab in the middle of campus. Smack dab in the middle of campus. It's old. It hasn't changed much. The south end zone still has seats that go all the way around. The north end zone is now a place where you can walk. There's a concourse. You can walk. You can watch the game from there. You can go into Stadium View Cafe and watch it there. You have all these luxuries of a stadium right in the middle of campus. And what's so unique is, as reporters, we get to walk down from the press box through the stands, which is cool for me being a Bearcat alum and a fan, onto the field to the post-game press conference room. You now, as a fan, get to experience all this as members of the Big 12. And the reason why Nippert Stadium, again, Wrigley Field hasn't changed much. Nippert Stadium is one of the oldest stadiums in the country. Wrigley Field is one of the oldest ballparks in all of Major League Baseball. And you think about college football stadiums, college basketball arenas, I find it hard to find in my head a school that has gotten a major new stadium or arena. All the stadiums that are not new. They're old. They look great. Michigan Stadium has been renovated. Ohio Stadium looks great. Notre Dame Stadium has been renovated. That's a great place to watch a college football game. I went to the Bearcats Notre Dame game back in 21. You think about Clemson Stadium looks great. Alabama's. You think about Austen Stadium up in Eugene, Oregon. There are so many stadiums that are not new in college football. Nippert Stadium is one of them. But the way that they stay in great condition and pristine is through renovations. And another thing, too, is I say this constantly on this show, and I cannot beat it into submission enough, how fortunate we are to be a fan, a student, an alum, a donor, whatever you will. For me, it's very fortunate. Being a daily podcast host, a third-generation alum, a fan, even though I live in Columbus currently, a Cincinnatian at the core, you Okay, to be a fan of a school that is in an urban area, it's not it's not like you're in some small town. You are in a city, a major city that, as Berry Tramel points out, has 7 Fortune 500 companies. He says there's nothing like UC in the Big 12, a huge university crammed into a small space in a big, bustling old Midwest city that is not decaying. Keywords, not decaying. Think about the banks. Think about downtown. Think about the campus, how many renovations. My mom says all the time in talks how much the campus has changed since she went to school. And I think a lot of people can say it's changed since I went to school there. And I'm barely 2 years out of school. So you think about all these amenities and features and perks of what Nippert Stadium offers to you as a Bearcats fan, and now what it's going to give the Big 12. Cincinnati is a pretty damn good market. And you think about the city of Cincinnati as a whole. I'm listening to Rick Eugenio on Reds Extra Innings, Kelsey Chevrolet Extra Innings on 700 WLW, home of the Bearcats, earlier this week. And, or was it last week? Whatever day it was. And he's talking about how there has never been a time in his 35 years that there has been this much momentum in the city as a whole. With what the Bearcats are doing going to the Big 12, with what the Bengals are doing with their massive expectations, with what the Reds all of a sudden are doing with their resurgence, with what FC Cincinnati is doing dominating Major League Soccer. And just imagine if Bearcats football and men's basketball have good seasons, which I think the potential is there. And you have college, and people care about college football. And I don't know if there's a stereotype or a preconceived notion or a conception that college football is run by small towns or whatever you call them. But maybe what Cincinnati's out to prove, whether the best teams are in Tuscaloosa or Athens, Georgia, college towns. But maybe Cincinnati's going to be out to prove that, hey, we're urban, but we can still be just as good. And for the record, Ohio State, and living in Columbus, I know I'm running long on this segment, but I can tell you having lived in Columbus, and I haven't lived in Columbus during football season yet, but Ohio State is a very, very similar feel to Cincinnati. It is an urban campus. It's big. The stadium's not smack dab in the middle of campus, but you can get to it easily. And Columbus is 3 miles down the road. You go down High Street. You can go down 315 South. You can get there multiple ways. So Ohio State has been good for decades. The Bearcats are going to be out to prove that they can be in a Power 5 conference and still be in an urban city, I should say, and still succeed in a Power 5 conference. And here's one more thing that Berry Tramel, which, again, you got to read. I mean, there's so many points I can mention. I'll mention this one last point, though. He says, all those students walking around campus create an energized environment. It's urban, which he quotes John Cunningham, director of athletics for Cincinnati, saying, John Cunningham said, quote, we do have a tendency to build up, not out, having to go vertical, but it's also enclosed. They've done a really remarkable job over the last 20 years making it a true campus experience. This isn't a commuter campus and has that collegiate feel. So it has the combination there of a collegiate feel, but also an urban campus, knowing that you are just steps away from the city. And you can see the whole skyline from, what are those parks? Now I'm blanking. Oh, shoot. I'll have to. Oh, man. No, I better not go on a search here in my brain to try and find those two parks. Anyway. Oh, I'm going to be up thinking about this. Okay, anyway. Up next. So we, as members of the college channel, the Locked On Podcast Network, we recently polled in all five Power 5 conferences. We polled several rankings in several categories. We'll go through some of those today here on Locked On Bearcats. But first, I'm here to tell you how this episode of Locked On Bearcats is brought to you by Bird Dogs. Bird Dogs makes you look good. Why? They stretch khaki shorts. Bird Dogs stretch khaki shorts are designed to fit slimmer, through the thigh and leg, giving you a truly sculpted look. Bird Dog shorts do the exact same thing as Lululemon, but they fit way better. Why? They fit way better than regular shorts that are made of a stiff, restricting cotton. Bird Dogs fixed this issue by inventing cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki, but stretches so you get a way slimmer fit without having to sacrifice movement. They use anti-stink sweat wicking fabric that keeps you cool and dry all day long. So right now, go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege for a free Yeti-style tumbler with your order. That's birddogs.com/lockedoncollege for a free Yeti-style tumbler. You won't want to take your bird dogs off. We promise you. Thank you again for making Locked On Bearcats your first listen of every day. Locked On's NBA mock draft is here. It's bigger than ever. Follow along the entire first round in a 6-episode ultimate mock draft experience. Only Locked On can deliver. All episodes are available now on Locked On NBA Big Board or on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Speaking of scouting, another great podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network that I have started to listen to is the Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes. Joe Marino of Locked On Bills, Kyle Krabs of Locked On Dolphins. They do a fantastic job, and over the past several weeks, they have done their state of the roster of all 32 NFL teams. The Bengals were Monday. They've done the Bills and the Chiefs as well this week. So go give Joe and Kyle a listen after, I say on the YouTube thumbnail, watch next Locked On Sports Today with Peter Bukowski. Make that your second listen, and then make Joe Marino and Kyle Krabs Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes your third listen. All right. So at the college channel, the Locked On Podcast Network, we recently pulled some Big 12 rankings. So we ranked several categories. I mean, we did so many. Let's see. And I'm only going to do some today, but we did football programs, football head coaches. We did projected starting quarterbacks, football offenses, football defenses, Big 12 fan bases, overall athletic programs, basketball programs, top 5 NFL prospects for the 2024 draft right now. So, and we did this for all Power 5 conferences, but specifically the Big 12. Let's start with, download it. Let's start with the football. Did I not? I can say, okay. Let's start with the football teams. The top 5 football teams, and I'll show them here on my screen if you're watching on YouTube, and I'll describe it, and I'll run through the list if you're listening. But here are the top 5 teams in the Big 12. We have Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas State, Baylor, Texas Tech, 1 through 5. Now, the full rankings, 1 through 14. They only show you 1 through 5 if you're watching on YouTube. The full rankings, TCU, UCF, Oklahoma State, Kansas, Iowa State, BYU, Cincinnati at 12, Houston, West Virginia. So the Bearcats ranked 12th, third amongst Big 12 newcomers. UCF is the only team coming in the top half. So being picked 12th, I think it's honestly way too low. You're going to tell me that Iowa State and Kansas are better. If you want to tell me BYU and Oklahoma State are better right now, fine. If you want to say UCF's in a better position because they have an experienced and established head coach and program right now based on the fact that they have an established head coach, fine. You want to say TCU's better, fine. Texas Tech, maybe. Baylor, they had a down year last year, but they could bounce back this year. I think 12 is way too low. Sorry, I haven't had my tag board up on my YouTube if you're watching. But I think that I get it, the situation the Bearcats are in. But what I don't get is why that automatically warrants a 12th place ranking. And again, maybe we don't know. And again, a lot of our podcasts on the college channel are Power 5 programs. I think last year, outside of Locked On Sunbelt, I don't even know if that's still on our channel. But last year, the Bearcats were one of, if not the only, group of 5 podcast on this channel. So that is very unique. I feel like Gonzaga is mid-major, but I consider them major, and they're a basketball-only school. And I think we have a boys' state. But anyway, 12 is way too low if you ask me. All right, So let's move to the top 5 head coaches in the Big 12. We have Chris Kleiman of Kansas State, Dave Aranda of Baylor, Mike Gundy of Oklahoma State, Sonny Dykes of TCU, and then Lance Leipold of Kansas. The Bearcats are 13th in Scott Satterfield. Understandable. Again, I think 13th is kind of harsh. He's the only coach ranked below him right now is Neil Brown of West Virginia, but ahead of him you have Dana Holgerson, Joey McGuire, Kalani Sitake, Brent Venables. I'm surprised he's as low as 9th, but then again, he didn't have a great year last year. Matt Campbell, Steve Sarkisian, Gus Malzahn is number 6. I really find it interesting how our hosts really are high on Central Florida going into the Big 12. And I get it. They had a great year last year. They went 9-3 in the regular season. They played Tulane tough in the conference championship game. And again, they have a head coach in Gus Malzahn. The Bearcats, we don't know what Scott Satterfield's going to do. So we're going to give him a 13th place ranking. Now, if he does well this year, he might bump up towards the middle of the pack. If he doesn't, he might stay at 13th, probably will. But this is understandable because maybe a lot of our hosts don't know much about him. Maybe they need to see a season of him coaching. That's understandable. Final one we'll do today. Top 5 basketball programs. Given that the Big 12 is a basketball conference first. So we have top 5. Kansas, Baylor, Houston, Texas, Kansas State. That's fair. That's very fair. Cincinnati was ranked 10th. Now, who is ranked ahead of them, you might ask? So we have right now ahead of Cincinnati and after Kansas State, Texas Tech, West Virginia, Oklahoma State, and TCU. I'm okay with that ranking because the Bearcats still need to rebuild. And you have to remember, West Virginia and TCU, they made the tournament last year. Texas Tech, prior to last year, tournament perennial. Oklahoma State's been in the tournament. This is a very, very interesting ranking. Below Cincinnati, you have BYU, Iowa State, Oklahoma, UCF. Interesting they put UCF that low and Oklahoma that low. Now, then again, they're leaving. So is Texas, though. And you also have Iowa State, who normally is really good. They made the tournament last year, lost to Pitt in the first round. And they also have BYU. We don't know. I don't know much about them as a basketball school. I don't really watch West Coast Conference basketball outside of Gonzaga. So again, if we're looking at it, it's fine. It's okay because they do need to rebuild. So that, as they say, is that when it comes to Big 12 rankings. We will do more next week. Big 12 offenses, Big 12 defenses, and overall best fan bases in the Big 12. Wait till you hear where Cincinnati is ranked in the Big 12 fan bases because I am shocked at where they're ranked. Put it to you that way. Up next, fun topic to round out the day, round out the week. If you were to compare the Bearcats football and men's basketball programs to tennis players, who would you compare them to and why? That next on Locked On Bearcats. All right, so I saw a comment recently on Twitter, and this has nothing to do with the Bearcats, but it basically this fan, this person on Twitter said that Joe Burrow could be like Novak Djokovic. And I'm like, okay, Novak Djokovic is probably the most dominant tennis player of our generation. Roger Federer fans might have some beef with me there. I'm not a tennis aficionado, but Novak Djokovic is, let's be honest, what he's accomplished in his career is nothing short of spectacular. There's a reason why Novak Djokovic is, I'm trying to see, how many Grand Slam titles does he have? Yeah, he's won a record 23 majors. There's a reason why he holds the record for most majors won. So that got me thinking, who would the Bearcats compare to? Bearcats football, I'm going to say Andy Murray. Andy Murray's always relevant. He's won 2 Wimbledons. He won the gold medal at the 2012 Olympics in London. The Bearcats, similarly, in the American Athletic Conference for 10 years, they won 2 conference championships. They only missed a bowl game in 2 seasons, so they went to 8 bowl games in 10 years. They went to the college football playoff. They shared another conference championship in 2014. And you just think, but I also think about this. Andy Murray's also had some disappointments. He would lose in the semifinals, whether it be to Federer, Djokovic, Nadal. He would lose early in tournaments. I remember one year he lost in the round of 16 in the U.S. Open. Bearcats in 2015 were projected to finish first in the conference. They ended up going 7-5, very mediocre season. The Bearcats in 2022, last year, were supposed to play for their fourth straight championship game and win a third straight conference championship. Neither of those things happened. They fell short of expectations. So while Andy Murray is a great player, and while the Bearcats are a great football program, oftentimes, for as relevant as they always will be, they have fallen short of expectations. All right, let's go to the men's basketball program. This is where I'm going to say Rafael Nadal. And I say this thinking about the Bearcats men's basketball program over a 30-year span. From 1992 through the present. Ever since the first year they went to the NCAA tournament under Bob Huggins, when they went to the Final Four. They've always been great in the regular season. Rafael Nadal is great on clay courts in the French Open. There's a reason why he wins the French Open almost every year. But he doesn't win Wimbledon or the Australian Open or the U.S. Open as frequently as he wins the French Open. And the Bearcats, similarly, when they were in Conference USA, would dominate it every single year. When they were in the American, they won 3 regular season titles. But when it came time to conference tournament, and they were good at conference tournament play, they won 4 Conference USA titles. They won 2 American championships. They played in the American Tournament Championship final on 4 different occasions. They played in the Big East final in 2012. But when it came time to the big dance, how many times would you watch the Bearcats, particularly in the 9 years they made the tournament under Mick Cronin? And they would, just like Nadal is great on clay courts, the Bearcats do well in the regular season and really well on defense, but when they get up against a team that can shoot from the outside and score, they succumb to that. They can't keep up. How many times did that doom them in the NCAA tournament? They were up by 4 against Ohio State in 2012. They lost by 15. They couldn't keep up with UCLA in the 2017 second round. That team was really good, just not nearly as good offensively as UCLA. 2018, I don't like talking about that year, but then again, Nevada was able to come back because they had outside shooting. The Bearcats did not. And in 2019, despite jumping out to an 18-5 lead just across the street from where I am, a Nationwide arena, the Bearcats could not withstand Iowa's very, very good three-point shooting in the second half. That's how good the Bearcats are in the regular season. Great defensively, great regular season records. But when it comes to being able to make shots in the postseason, it's not what the Bearcats thrived on, and it was their Achilles heel and their Waterloo. And just like Napoleon surrendered, the Bearcats bowed out early in the NCAA tournaments. Several times. So, relevancy, but falling short of expectations sometimes. Football program compared to Andy Murray. Men's basketball program, dominance in the regular season, dominant on defense, just like Rafael Nadal, great on clay courts in the French Open. But when it comes to Wimbledon, when it comes to the U.S. Open, and when it comes to conference tournaments or the NCAA tournament, the Bearcats fall short of expectations. There you go. Well, that's going to do it for me this week. That is going to do it until Tuesday. We're back next week. Berry Tramel is going to join me. Berry Tramel, the Oklahoman, who's going to join me to talk about the columns he wrote on the University of Cincinnati and what he thinks they're going to do and bring to the Big 12 as assets, plus the 5-year anniversary. The 5-year anniversary that I teased yesterday is next Thursday. It involves the Cincinnati Bearcats. missing out on a prized transfer. I'll leave you with that. As always, thank you so much for making Locked On Bearcats your first listen of every day. For everyday listeners, we're back on Tuesday. So much to get to, even with not much happening around the programs, but we're rolling. I mean, we are rolling. More on the Big 12, more Big 12 rankings that we polled. Berry Tramel next week. Russ will probably join me next week, or maybe Neil or whoever we get on the show. As always, I'm on Twitter at Frankie_Natty with 2 N's and an ATI. Instagram, AlexFrank_. Email, alex3frank@gmail.com. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast with Peter Bukowski, who also hosts Locked On Packers. Peter Bukowski goes through the biggest stories in sports in 22 minutes or less on the Locked On Sports Today podcast. I'm back on Tuesday. Have a great weekend. Wishing my Uncle Jerry, wishing my grandfather, wishing my Uncle Dan, God rest his soul, a very, very wishing my grandfather, Bruce, wishing all of them a very, very happy Father's Day. And I hope you enjoy Father's Day with your fathers as well. Thanks so much for making Locked On Bearcats your first, listen of every day. I'm Alex Frank for Locked On Bearcats. Have a great rest of your day. Have a great weekend. I'll be back on Tuesday right here on Locked On Bearcats.